The low hum of static filled my cramped studio, a constant companion since the city had succumbed to the unending electrical storms. The monitors flickered with waveforms, spectral fragments of a frequency I had been chasing relentlessly. Hours blurred into one another, the outside world dissolving beneath layers of static and data. Tonight, something was different. As the storm rumbled in the distance, a pattern emerged from the chaos, a rhythm pulsing in sync with the thunder, a heartbeat buried beneath the noise. I leaned closer, eyes scanning the cascade of numbers and audio waves. The broadcasts I had collected over weeks, each fragment a whisper from that other place, now aligned like pieces of a puzzle. They weren't random. They followed a pattern, a fragile signal threading through the storm's fury. My fingers trembled as I adjusted the filters, isolating the frequency that had haunted my nights. It pulsed steadily, a haunting thrum that seemed to echo the city's heartbeat. The studio's dim light cast long shadows, the clutter of cables and equipment around me feeling like the tangled web I was ensnared in. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the jagged skyline. The city was a living organism, its storms both prison and key. Somewhere within that tempest was the liminal zone, the doorway between worlds. I had only glimpsed through fractured signals. My thoughts drifted briefly to Mara. She had been my anchor, my voice of reason amid the growing chaos in my mind. But lately, her visits had become strained, her sharp eyes shadowed with worry. Our last conversation replayed in my mind, her words sharp but caring. "Elias, you're slipping away," she had said, frustration and fear tangled in her voice. "This obsession is consuming you." "I have to know, Mara," I had replied, my voice barely above a whisper. "If I don't, those voices will be lost forever." She shook her head, the weight of our growing distance crushing. I hated that my quest isolated me, but the pull of the unknown was too strong. Back at the monitors, I mapped the frequencies against the storm's cycles. The liminal zone wasn't just a theory, it was real. A fragile seam where reality thinned and the echoes of that trapped realm bled through. Each pulse of the frequency was a breath, a signal from beyond our world begging for connection. The realization was electric, a mixture of awe and dread. What lay beyond the veil? Was it salvation or damnation? The deeper I tuned, the more the city seemed to warp around me. Static patterns shifted like living things, whispering secrets I could barely comprehend. Exhaustion tugged at my limbs, but sleep was a stranger. Instead, I climbed to the rooftop under the rain's cold kiss, the city sprawling beneath me like a circuit board alive with energy. Storms crackled, casting surreal light over the wet asphalt and glass towers. The liminal space was out there, somewhere in the heart of this storm-ravaged city, and I was its reluctant herald. I pressed my palm to the cold metal railing, grounding myself against the storm's fury and my own spiraling thoughts. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, but I couldn't turn back now. The voices depended on me. As lightning arced across the sky, illuminating the darkness, I whispered a silent vow to cross the threshold, to confront the unknown, and to bring the trapped souls back from the edge of silence. But at what cost? The city's static whispered answers I wasn't ready to hear. And in that moment, the line between reality and the broadcast blurred irrevocably, pulling me deeper into the storm's secret. I wasn't just chasing signals anymore. I was chasing a lifeline, and the storm was listening. The city was a tempest tonight, a living beast of crackling energy and relentless rain. Elias Vaughn adjusted the collar of his worn coat, the fabric soaked through but no shield against the electric ferocity that raged overhead. Lightning tore the sky in jagged blue veins, illuminating the streets in stark, fleeting flashes. The static was louder here, as if the storm itself were a desperate broadcast. A scream trapped in electromagnetic waves swirling around the twisted cityscape. He clutched his handheld receiver tighter, the device a fragile lifeline amid the chaos. The hidden frequency pulsed erratically, a beacon threading through the storm's violent static. The voices came again, whispers barely audible over the thunder, fragile and urgent. "Help. Trapped. Don't forget us." Ilias's breath hitched. They weren't just signals anymore. They were cries from a place stitched into the very fabric of the storm, a liminal realm where reality bled into something else. His footsteps splashed through puddles, reflecting fractured neon signs, flickering advertisements that seemed to glitch like corrupted data. The city's usual hum was overwhelmed by the storm's roar, but beneath it, the voices persisted, layered, overlapping, a chorus of silent suffering. He rounded a corner, heart pounding as the air thickened with electricity. Images flickered at the edge of his vision, ghostly overlays of shadowed buildings, unfamiliar yet hauntingly familiar. The boundary between worlds was thin here. He could feel it. Elias's status. Mara's voice crackled urgently in his earpiece. "I'm close," he replied, voice tight. The storm's amplifying the signal. It's like the city's heartbeat, pulsing with another rhythm. "Be careful," she warned. "Crow's agents are closing in." The thought sharpened his senses. Somewhere in the rain-drenched maze, the cold presence of the silent authority lurked. Their mechanical voices a sinister counterpoint to the storm's natural fury. Surveillance drones whirred overhead, nearly invisible against the dark clouds. Elias ducked into a narrow alley, the walls slick with rain and static-charged air. He raised his receiver, adjusting the dials, trying to filter the interference. The voices became clearer, fragmented phrases of despair and hope intertwined. "Don't let them silence us. Find the breach. Save us." His mind teetered on the edge of comprehension and madness. The storm's electric tendrils seemed to reach for him, pulling him deeper into a reality where time and space folded unpredictably. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed nearby. Ilias spun, heart racing, catching a glimpse of a shadow slipping into the Foga harbinger of the enforcers. He sprinted, rain lashing his face, static buzzing in his ears like a swarm of angry insects. "Ilias, this way." Mara's voice guided him to a hidden alcove where Dr. Sato awaited, his pale face illuminated by the flickering stormlights. "The liminal space is destabilizing," Sato said grimly. "You're pushing the boundary too far. If it collapses here, both worlds could suffer irreparable damage." Elias shook his head, resolve hardening. "I have to know. I have to reach them." Together, they adjusted the equipment, trying to stabilize the frequency as the storm's fury crescendoed. Blue sparks danced along wires, syncing with the crackling energy overhead. The voices grew louder, more desperate. Elias closed his eyes, reaching out into the storm's heart. For a moment, the city fell silent, and he stood on the precipice of something vast and unknowable. Then, the world shattered into a kaleidoscope of sound and light, and Elias was no longer certain where he ended and the storm began. The chase was far from over. The silent authority would not relent, and at the storm's edge, the fragile boundary between salvation and oblivion trembled. As the thunder rolled and lightning danced, Elias faced the impossible: to bridge worlds or be consumed by the static forever. The storm was no longer just a backdrop. It was the battleground, and Elias was running out of time. The storm that night was relentless, The city swallowed in a cloak of rain, an electrical fury that seemed to pulse with the static hum that had become our constant companion. Mara's voice crackled urgently over the encrypted cum, the sound distorted yet unmistakably tense. "They're coming, Elias." I barely got out. I lost them in the lower alleys, but it was close, too close. My heart thudded in my chest, a frantic rhythm against the steady drone of the storm outside my window. I gripped the edge of my workstation, the cluttered array of monitors and audio equipment casting flickering shadows across my face. The room was thick with the scent of stale coffee and ozone, the air vibrating faintly with the omnipresent static. "Are you safe now? Where are you?" I asked, voice tight. "Safe enough. For now, I'm heading to the safe house. We need to regroup. They're not just after you. They want to shut us both down." The silent authority had escalated their efforts. Their reach was creeping ever closer. Their shadowy presence a constant reminder that our quest was no longer just a personal obsession, but a battle against a faceless, merciless force determined to keep the city and the worlds beyond silent. I glanced at the latest recordings on my screen, the waveform flickering erratically. Among the usual static, I isolated a new voice, fragile, urgent, a whisper layered with despair and hope. It was clearer than before, a plaintive plea that pierced the veil of noise. My fingers hovered over the controls, hesitant yet compelled. "Listen," I murmured, pressing play. The voice emerged, a trembling echo from the other side of the storm, a message etched in desperation. "Please, help us. Trapped, can you hear?" A shiver ran down my spine. The voices were multiplying, their suffering growing more palpable. Each transmission was a thread, pulling me deeper into a labyrinth of lost souls and fractured realities. The weight of their silent screams pressed against my mind, blurring the edges of my own sanity. The door creaked open, and Mara slipped inside, rain dripping from her short hair, eyes sharp and haunted. "They were close," she said quietly. "I think they know what we're doing. Crow's men won't stop until they've erased every trace." I nodded, swallowing hard. The city's oppressive atmosphere was closing in. The electrical storms no longer just a backdrop, but an active participant in our unfolding nightmare. "We have to keep going," I said, voice resolute despite the fear gnawing at my core. "If we don't, those voices, they'll remain trapped forever." Mara met my gaze, a flicker of fierce loyalty shining through the exhaustion. "Then we find a way." Together, as the storm raged on, so did our resolve. The static was no longer just noise. It was a call, a haunting, desperate call that we could not ignore. And as the city trembled beneath the electric sky, I knew the cost of silence was far greater than we had ever imagined. But the question lingered in the charged air. At what price would our voices finally break through the storm? The hunt was no longer just for answers, it was for survival, for connection, for the chance to bring light to the darkest frequencies of existence. And as the night deepened, so did the shadows that watched and waited. I adjusted the dials, the faint echo of a new voice threading through the static, fragile yet unmistakable. "Help us, please." And with that, the storm outside seemed to hold its breath, the city poised on the edge of an uncertain dawn. The small laboratory smelled of ozone and cold metal, the faint hum of machines filling the air like an unending electrical heartbeat. I stood stiffly in the center of the room, my eyes flickering between the array of devices that blinked and pulsed with cryptic data. Dr. Kalen Sato, thin and pale as ever, hovered over a peculiar contraption, a tangle of wires, coils, and screens that seemed to breathe with static energy. His glasses caught the dim light, reflecting 1,000 fractured images that made his gaze impossible to read. "You realize what you're asking?" he said, not looking at me. Fingers deftly adjusting knobs that sent ripples through the device's low-frequency hum. "This isn't just about listening anymore. We're poking at the very fabric of the liminal space. One wrong move and the feedback could be catastrophic." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words settle over me like the relentless storm outside. "I know the risks, Kalen, but if we don't try, the voices of the people trapped there, they'll suffer in silence forever." He finally turned to face me, a shadow of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Idealism suits you, Elias, but I've been involved in this research longer than you know. There are stakes far beyond your empathy." The atmosphere between us thickened, charged with unspoken truths. Mara sat quietly in the corner, her sharp eyes betraying her concern. She didn't say a word, but her presence reminded me that I wasn't alone in this, though trust was still a fragile currency in this city. Kalen placed a hand on the device, his fingers trembling slightly. "This is an experimental stabilizer designed to anchor the frequency, not just capture it, but hold it steady, long enough for coherent communication. But it draws heavily on the city's electromagnetic flux. If the storm intensifies unexpectedly, the city will shake," I finished, knowing all too well the consequences. The storms weren't just weather, they were the pulse of the liminal space itself, unpredictable and violent. We spent hours calibrating the machine, each adjustment met with a symphony of static, crackles, and distorted voices that seemed to leak from another reality. The device responded, its humming deepening into a resonant chord that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. "It's working," Mara whispered, stepping closer to the screens displaying fluctuating waveforms that danced like ghostly specters. But beneath the excitement, a knot of doubt twisted in my gut. Kellen's eyes betrayed a flicker of hesitation, a secret kept close to his chest. I wondered what price he had already paid for this knowledge and what price we were about to pay. The storm outside raged louder, as if reacting to our intrusion. The boundaries between worlds felt thinner than ever, fragile strands of static threading through the air, whispering promises and threats alike. As the night deepened, our uneasy alliance solidified. Kellen's technology gave me a new weapon against the silence, but also a new enemy in the form of unknown consequences. The gamble to stabilize the liminal space was set, and I was about to find out if hope could survive in the eye of the storm. "We move forward," I said, voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. Together, Kalen nodded, but his eyes remained distant, haunted by shadows I couldn't yet comprehend. Mara reached out, placing a steady hand on my shoulder, silent vow of solidarity, as the lab filled once more with the eerie song of unfathomable frequencies. The game had changed. The static was no longer just noise. It was a battleground, and I was ready to fight. The hum of the city's unending static was a constant companion. But tonight, amidst the buzzing machines and tangled cables of my studio, something shifted. I had spent countless hours dissecting the indecipherable chaos, chasing fragments of sound that teased the edge of comprehension. Now, with the device I'd cobbled together from scavenged parts and relentless tinkering, the hidden broadcast trembled into focus like a fragile thread pulling me toward the unknown. The device was a maze of circuitry, a hybrid amplifier designed not just to boost signal strength, but to filter the noise with a precision I hadn't dared hope for. Dr. Sato had helped me calibrate the electromagnetic lenses, his pale fingers steady despite the flickering uncertainty in his eyes. Mara hovered nearby, her sharp gaze scanning the room for any sign of danger or malfunction. her loyalty a steady anchor in the swirling storm of my obsession. As the first clear voice slipped through, a taut silence fell over the studio. The sound was faint, but unmistakably human, a trembling whisper laced with desperation and raw fear. It reached into the core of me, and for a moment, the static ceased to be mere interference. It became a veil, thin and fragile, concealing a world of silent suffering. "Help us," the voice pleaded, fragile as a dying breath. "We're trapped. Please." I froze, breath caught in my throat. Mara's hand brushed my arm, grounding me as the weight of their words settled over us like a shroud. The voices weren't just echoes of some lost broadcast. They were alive, ensnared in a liminal space I barely understood. "Elias," Mara whispered, "we need to be careful. This isn't just data, it's people." Her pragmatism was a bomb and a challenge. Could I truly protect us both and still chase the truth? The question gnawed at me as I adjusted the controls, coaxing the device to peel back further layers of static. Dr. Sato's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "You're delving deeper than any safe boundary tonight. The electromagnetic fluctuations could destabilize the liminal space. Or you." I met his pale gaze, the scientist's warning a cold thread weaving through my determination. But the voices called to me, their fragile pleas echoing inside the hollows left by my own loss. They were trapped, just like my sibling had been, lost to the storms that had shaped this city's dark soul. Over hours that bled into the early morning, the broadcast grew clearer, voices layering into a tapestry of pain and hope. I could hear their stories, fractured, fragmented, but painfully real. They spoke of confinement, of silence forced by shadows beyond the storms, and of an aching desire to reach out, to connect, to be freed. Each message was a shard of emotion, stabbing through my defenses. I recorded them obsessively, the tapes filling with spectral echoes that felt less like signals and more like haunted memories. But the breakthrough came at a cost. The emotional weight pressed down on me, dragging my mind into a tempest of guilt and fear. I questioned my sanity as the voices blended with memories and nightmares, blurring the line between mission and madness. Mara confronted me one evening, her voice steady but edged with concern. "Elias, you can't carry this alone. You're slipping away." I nodded, unwilling to admit the truth, that the voices had become a mirror, reflecting my own fractured soul back at me. Yet, beneath the despair, a stubborn flame of hope burned bright. The device was a bridge, fragile but real, and I was the only one who could hold it steady. As the city storms raged outside, I made a silent vow. I would listen. I would try to understand, and somehow I would find a way to answer their calls, even if it meant losing myself in the static forever. The first step was clear, to pierce the veil and reach out to turn the haunting whispers into a chorus of rescue. But the silence that followed the last transmission was thick with uncertainty, a reminder that every discovery would come with shadows. The resonance of the voices had changed everything, and nothing could prepare me for what lay ahead. And yet, I could not turn back. Not now. The storm outside thundered in a relentless rhythm, but inside, a new signal hummed. A fragile promise threaded through the static, waiting to be answered. The studio was alive tonight, but not with life. It breathed in static, exhaled distortion. Elias sat hunched over his array of devices, the room dimly lit by the dull glow of monitors and the erratic flicker of neon bleeding through the grimy window. The hum of the city's relentless electrical storms was always there, a constant companion. But now, the static seemed less like background noise, and more like an entity, a presence that curled around the edges of his consciousness, whispering, beckoning. He adjusted the dial on his receiver with trembling fingers, eyes fluttering as the signals warped and twisted, transforming the usual white noise into something disturbingly alive. A pattern emerged, or so he thought at first. Fleeting whispers, sharp bursts of unintelligible speech, and then silence that pressed heavy against his eardrums. His heartbeat quickened, thudding in his chest like a warning drum. Elias, Mara's voice cut through the haze, firm but gentle. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching him with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. "You've been at this for hours. You need to rest." He shook his head, the static inside his skull rising to a crescendo. "They're trying to speak through it, Mara. I can hear them, the trapped voices. But the interference, it's warping everything. I can't tell what's real anymore." Mara stepped inside, closing the door against the storm's howl outside. "You're letting it get to you," she said softly. "This obsession, it's breaking you. I'm worried." Elias's gaze flickered to her, eyes wild but pleading. "If I don't find the truth, if I don't reach them, what happens then? I can't lose them. Not like I lost." His voice cracked, the weight of his past loss bleeding into the present. Mara moved closer, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Elias. But you have to hold on to yourself first." The room seemed to tilt as Elias closed his eyes, the static merging with the memories that haunted him. The voices overlapping with his own thoughts, a chaotic symphony that threatened to drown his sanity. He opened his eyes to the dim light, determination warring with exhaustion. Later, outside, the storm raged with a deafening fury. Elias wandered the wet streets, neon signs flickering above, their colors bleeding into each other like spilled ink. The city was a fractured mirror, reflecting his fractured mind. Every shadow moved with a life of its own. Every crack in the pavement whispered secrets he was desperate to understand. He paused beneath a flickering street lamp, breathing in the sharp scent of ozone and rain. The static still clung to the air, a ghostly residue that wrapped around his senses. He reached for his recorder, fingers numb but steady, capturing the haunting interference that no one else could hear. Back in the studio, night deepened. Elias sat alone, headphones cocooning his ears in a world of static and silence. The voices came again, fragile and desperate, threading through the noise like fragile threads of a tapestry he was desperate to unravel. His breath was shallow, heart a fragile rhythm in the quiet. He was caught between worlds, the known and the unknown, reality and hallucination, hope and despair. Mara's words echoed in his mind, a tether to reality he clung to desperately. The fractures in his mind were widening, the static threatening to swallow him whole. But beneath the fear, beneath the chaos, a stubborn ember of hope burned bright. There were voices out there, trapped, pleading, waiting, and Elias would find a way to reach them, no matter the cost. But as the storm outside began to wane, the static inside him pulsed louder than ever, a fractured symphony that promised both revelation and ruin. The line between signal and noise, sanity and madness, was vanishing, and Elias stood at the edge, teetering between salvation and oblivion. The night was far from over, and the fractures were only beginning to deepen.